The 2024 presidential election. Are you still undecided? That's what we're talking about on this episode of the Driving with Rob podcast. The 2024 presidential election. People have been saying it's the most important election of our lifetime. Do they not always say that? Every presidential election is important. And what the news media keeps telling us is that Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are both out campaigning hard for the undecided voters. And at this point, I would be really surprised if there are any undecideds left. I think you could probably have the election today and get it over with. Now, the governor's race here in North Carolina is still pretty hotly contested. All the arch conservatives want Mark Robinson. And all the die-hard Democrats want Josh Stein. So I think the North Carolina governor's race is probably more hotly contested than the presidential race. But with 3 weeks left to go until the election, I would really be surprised if there are any undecideds left. Because everything aside, do you know who you're voting for? And do you know why you're voting for them? And to me, that's the most important thing. More important than who you're voting for. Do you know why you're voting for that person? So let's talk about the Trump-Harris race. Pretty much, the Trump-Harris race comes down into two camps. I think Donald Trump was a good president, or I hate Donald Trump. That's really pretty much the only two choices there are. And I understand the I hate Donald Trump camp. I really do. I don't like Donald Trump either. I personally don't like him. And I said 2 years ago after the midterm elections, I hope Donald Trump doesn't try to run again. Because in my opinion, the whole 2020 election came down to, I'm not Donald Trump, vote for me. So did the 2016 election, honestly. I'm not Donald Trump, vote for me. But I think in 2016, people just so totally underestimated how much hatred the American people have for Hillary Clinton. They just completely underestimated how against Hillary Clinton the American voting public was. So in 2016, they ran Joe. And we know what happened with Joe Biden. Personally, I think Joe Biden was having cognitive problems in 2020, but he was able to campaign from his basement. You never saw him. He never made any speeches. He didn't really go out and campaign. And yet somehow won. I'll go ahead and be honest and upfront with you right now. I really don't think there are as many undecideds as the mainstream news media would have you believe. But I believe that there are people who don't like Donald Trump at all because of his attitude. They don't like Kamala Harris because pretty much even the Harris supporters know that she would be a horrible president. So I think when the news media refers to undecided, what I really think they're talking about is if Trump really does some boneheaded thing or says some really offensive thing between now and the election, that'll push people who aren't necessarily passionate about Trump over to the Harris side. But I'm going to go ahead and give you my opinion on Harris. I don't think she can do the job. I think, as chaotic as the world is right now. Neither her nor Tim Walz has the ability to manage it. I have zero confidence in their ability to fix the economy. I have zero confidence in their ability to handle the situation in Ukraine, which for some reason has been pushed off the front page. They have no clue what to do, or even if they should do anything about the war in Israel. I believe that both of these people are in the pockets of communist China. So in short, what is already a chaotic economy and a chaotic world right now, I don't believe neither Harris nor Walz or the people working behind the scenes in the Democrat Party can do anything to fix it. But I do believe they can make it worse. Okay? If I can quote Kamala. Okay? But as I said, I don't particularly like Trump either. I think if I knew him in person, we would get along. But Trump is arrogant and a little bit of a steamroller. So I don't think we'd be able to hang out. But I would still have more in common with Donald Trump than I do Kamala Harris. But personally, no matter how much you hate Donald Trump, there is no way that any thinking person can say that the country and the world would be better off with Kamala Harris as president. There is no way. And to understand why I say this, let's go back to the Obama presidency. See, one of the things that the Democrats and the Harris campaign are counting on is the short memory of the American people, and the fact that there are a lot of young voters who don't remember, who are too young to remember, how horrible the Obama presidency was. I mean, it was bad. It was horrible. But see, too many people forget how awful it was when Obama was president. Too many people were too young to know how awful it was. Almost immediately after Obama took office, the economy of the United States started to tank because of the horrible economic decisions made by the Obama administration. Gasoline prices doubled almost overnight. The housing market collapsed. Interest rates went up. The cost of everything you bought went up. Unemployment and bank foreclosures were at the highest rates since the Great Depression. This is not an opinion. Go look it up. You forget the 2008 Obama recession like it never happened. We almost lost our house. We had never, no matter how hard times had gotten, we never even came close to losing our house until the Obama recession that began in 2008 and really escalated in 2009. But see, when I talk to my children, and all my children now are in their late 20s, early 30s, have told me, when I told them the story, I didn't know that we were that close to losing the house. And I said, I know, because your mother and I shielded you from that. You didn't know how bad times were. We didn't want you to know how bad times were in 2009 and even into 2010. And things really didn't start to turn around at all for us until 2011, because I was finally able to get a good paying job. Between 2008 and 2011, this is no exaggeration, I sent out at least 500 job applications. And I have a college degree. I'm a licensed electrical contractor. I have 30 years of experience. At the time, I had 30 years of experience in manufacturing and automation repair. I had supervisory experience. I had management experience. And I couldn't find a job for 3 years. Not a job that paid enough to pay my bills. But see, my 30-year-old children were shielded from all that. They didn't know how bad times really were under Obama. But times were horrible under Obama. And I was really, really disappointed that Obama got elected for a second term after he utterly destroyed the economy of the United States. It was a worse economy than it was under Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter, up until that time, had the worst economy since the Great Depression. And Obama's was worse. But yet, he was re-elected president. And again, I was very disappointed because I saw so many black people, African Americans, on social media, on the news, who said, I voted for him the first time because of the color of his skin. I voted for him because it was the first time that a black man was ever a legitimate candidate for president of the United States. And as we know, Obama won the primary, so he became the nominee and ultimately became president. But all these people kept saying, but I'm not going to vote for him again because of how he destroyed the economy of the United States. But damn if you didn't all go vote for him again. And I saw interviews after that of people who said they went into the voting booth fully intending to not vote for Obama again. But when it came time to pull the lever, when it came time to mark the ballot, they still said to themselves, he's black, so I'm voting for him anyway. I mean, you can argue with that if you want, but it's the absolute facts. It's irrefutable. You can go on YouTube, Google it, whatever you want. But at the end of the day, Obama won because he got the black vote. And see, here's the thing. Probably 30%, maybe between 30 and 40% of all the voters, white voters, are going to vote Democrat no matter who runs. No matter who they run, they're going to vote Democrat, whoever the Democrat is. No matter how awful they are, they're going to vote Democrat. Well, if you get 30% of the white vote, but 90% of the black vote, you still win. No matter how awful you are, no matter how you've proven that you can't do the job they elected you to do, you get 30% of the white people and 90% of the black people, you still win. But now, Obama said, when he was campaigning for Hillary as the sitting president, I remember distinctly two things, and I think I've even mentioned it on previous podcasts. Two things that Obama said when he was campaigning for Hillary from the White House. Number one, Trump does not have a magic wand to fix this economy. And when Obama made that statement, that told me two things. Number one, he didn't know how to fix it. And number two, he was pretty sure that neither Hillary nor Trump could fix it because he was out of ideas. He knew the economy was crap, and he knew he caused it, and he had no idea of how to fix it. And he didn't think anybody else could either. And the other thing I distinctly remember Obama saying as he campaigned for Hillary, the biggest threat to U.S. national security right now is not Iran, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, any of the Middle East terrorist organizations. The biggest threat to U.S. security right now is North Korea. And those are the two things I distinctly remember Obama saying as he campaigned for Hillary. Donald Trump doesn't have a magic wand to fix the economy, and the biggest threat to our national security is North Korea. Well, Donald Trump became president. He pretty much had the economy fixed in 6 months. He invited the Prime Minister of China to America and sat down and had one-on-one meetings with the Prime Minister of China. Then Donald Trump went to North Korea, something Obama never did, even though he said North Korea was our biggest threat. He never went there. Trump went there. Trump went over, stepped across the demilitarized zone, and went into North Korea and met with Kim Jong-un. And I don't know what Trump told the Chinese. I don't know what he told North Korea. But you didn't hear a squeak out of North Korea for the next 4 years. And he fixed the economy within 6 months of getting into office. And see, when Trump got into office, we have a problem with border security on our southern border. Too many illegals are entering the country. 6 months after Biden took office, even the news media referred to it as the crisis on the southern border. And while Trump was president, the Russians did not try to invade Ukraine. Now, another thing to go back to Obama. You remember Crimea, the Crimean Peninsula? That was part of Ukraine, till the Russians took it over and put their troops everywhere. Then it belonged to Russia. It had formerly belonged to Ukraine. Well, they took Crimea under the Obama administration, basically without firing a shot. But you didn't hear a squeak out of them while President Trump was in office. As soon as Biden took office, well, as a matter of fact, after Biden won the election, Russia started putting tanks and missile launchers on the border between Russia and Crimea. And as soon as Trump was no longer in office, he went ahead and moved those troops into Ukraine, because now he was going to take the rest of Ukraine. While Trump was in office, you remember something called the Abraham Accords? Trump worked out a peace treaty. I think it was with 3 different Arab countries, a non-aggression pact against Israel, promising to become allies with Israel. And he almost had a deal worked out with the Saudis. Well, if he had gotten Saudi Arabia to sign a peace treaty with Israel, Iran would have never dared to start funding Hamas and Hezbollah, because they respect and fear the Saudis, and they know the friendship that the United States and the Saudi Arabians have. While Trump was president, there was peace in the Middle East. The economy was booming. He had neutralized the North Korean threat, but Biden proved that he could get black voters to vote for him, because he was Obama's vice president. And who knew that Obama had coattails? But he did. Black people voted for Biden because he was Obama's vice president. And if you go back and look at the old YouTube videos, back in the 70s, when Biden first became a senator, he was promoting segregation. He was promoting racial hatred against blacks. But again, Americans have short memories. Y'all forgot all of that. Because we have to beat Trump. So once Biden proved that he could pull the black vote, you get 30% of the white vote and 90% of the black vote, you win. Even though Bernie Sanders was winning all the primaries and beating Joe Biden in every poll, Buttigieg was getting more votes than Biden. But once Biden won the South Carolina primary, and it was shown that Biden could get black votes, all of a sudden you didn't hear any more news reports about the Buttigieg campaign or the Bernie Sanders campaign. They basically just faded into the background because we have to win. The Democrats have to win at all cost. We think Joe Biden can do it. We think he's the only one who can do it. Because it really doesn't matter as long as we beat Donald Trump. Because Donald Trump is messing up our lives. Even though Donald Trump was getting opposition from both sides, he was actually beginning to drain the swamp like he said he would. But once the Republican lawmakers and the Democrat lawmakers joined forces against Trump, it was very hard for Trump to get anything accomplished. Because the Republican politicians were just as corrupt as the Democrats. And I'll go ahead and say this too. You will never convince me that 2020 wasn't a stolen election. Never. And I'll tell you why. Donald Trump was filling up 30,000-seat arenas during his campaign stop. Biden couldn't draw flies. Nobody supported Biden. But once they found out that you got 30% of all the white voters who are voting Democrat, no matter who the Democrat is, and 90% of the black vote, you still win. But Biden wasn't capable in 2020. That's the reason I say it was a stolen election. Even in the little county that I live in, I think we have something like 90,000 registered voters in the county. And I have a good friend on the county commission who told me that there were 8,000 confirmations of voter fraud just in our county. Just in our county. And you think, well, 8,000 ain't much. But 10% of all votes cast were fraudulent. 10% of Lincoln County ain't much. It's only about 8,000 of the confirmed voter fraud cases. You take 10% of New York City, that's 800,000 votes. And you know and I know, because it's almost a cliche, most of the voter fraud is coming from the Democrats. Always has. You know, there's been a running joke my whole life. I never voted Democrat until after I was dead. That's how bad it is. So you know the vast majority of voter fraud is perpetrated by the Democrats. You will never convince me that the 2020 election wasn't a stolen election. I think Joe was in cognitive decline in 2020, but nobody knew and nobody talked about it. Because the only thing that mattered was beating Donald Trump. So let's get back to Kamala Harris. During the Democrat debate, I think it was blatantly obvious that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden didn't like each other at all. And in spite of people referring to Kamala Harris as the female Barack Obama, she was one of the lowest vote getters during the Democrat primary of 2020. Kamala Harris didn't just hint that she thought Joe Biden was racist, which he is. She flat-footed accused him of being a racist. All the other Democrats beat Kamala during the primary. Buttigieg got more votes. Bernie Sanders got more votes. Klobuchar got more votes. They all got more votes than Kamala. Nobody wanted Kamala in 2020. But when it came time to pick a running mate, and all the media people were speculating, who do you think he's going to pick? I told my wife, I said, he's going to pick Kamala Harris. And she said, but they hate each other. I said, doesn't matter. It's all about beating Trump. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. If it means beating Donald Trump, they will join forces. And right now, with the Democrats being all about skin color and gender, Kamala Harris is a woman of color with enough name recognition to put Biden over the top, or they think will put Biden over the top. Doesn't matter that they hate each other. Doesn't matter that they disagree on virtually everything. He's going to pick Kamala Harris as his running mate. Well, see, I didn't know. I think it's becoming blatantly obvious now that the plan all along was Joe can beat Trump. So let's get Joe elected. Let's make Kamala his running mate. And maybe sometime during the campaign, Joe can resign and she can become the first woman president of the United States. And I think it's blatantly obvious now, looking back on it, the plan all along was to make Kamala Harris president, but they knew Kamala Harris couldn't beat Donald Trump. Not then. Hell, she couldn't beat Klobuchar back then. But after 4 years as vice president, that gives her enough credibility, they think they can do it this time. And when you have seen in the very, very few interviews that Kamala Harris has done and that Tim Walz has done, you can see that deer in headlights look when they ask her specific questions. Tell us what you plan to do to fix this economy. Tell us what you plan to do about the Israelis fighting a war on two fronts. Tell us specifically what you plan to do about the Russians in Ukraine. What do you plan to do about the crisis at the southern border? She has yet to answer one of those questions. We're going to make billionaires pay their fair share. That's pretty much all she's got. And she's pro-abortion. And that's the reason even the Democrat governor is campaigning on pro-abortion. Like that's the only plank in the platform that they think they can win on. Because they think there are enough women angry enough about Roe versus Wade being overturned. If we get 30% of the white vote, and 90% of the black vote, and 90% of the angry feminist vote, then Kamala still wins. Even though it's going to plunge the country deeper into chaos than it already is. Even though the entire earth is going to become a less safe place to live. Doesn't matter. We keep Donald Trump out. And that's all that matters. So, to sum up, nobody could with good conscience say Kamala can fix it. Because she can't. And when you ask her pointed questions, what do you plan to do about this? What do you plan to do about that? She's got nothing. She's got no answer. She has no plan. So there are going to be a certain group of people who are going to vote Kamala because they hate Donald Trump that much. I don't like Donald Trump either. But every citizen in the country was better off when Trump was president. So I'm going to vote for Trump again. And that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. I'm sure some of you will disagree with my opinions, but you know, there's a lot of facts that all you have to do is Google it and find out that everything I told you is the truth. But I do appreciate you listening, and I do appreciate you downloading. And if you like the podcast, chances are you have friends who will also like the podcast. Just tell them to go to Google and search for the Driving with Rob podcast, and they'll find it. All right? Thanks again. I'll talk to you next time. Bye now.